Steve McQueen adjusted his prison uniform jacket and looked directly at Dustin Hoffman. The Caribbean heat was suffocating, but something in McQueen's pale eyes was colder than the morning ocean breeze. "The method is a mask, Dustin. Just be the character." Hoffman stopped mid-gesture, his intensive preparation suddenly feeling exposed. If you respect the real Steve McQueen, subscribe to Steve McQueen, Untold Legacy, July 1973. Falmouth, Jamaica. Papillon production, week 7 of an 18-week shoot that was testing every actor, crew member, and piece of equipment against Caribbean conditions that made Hollywood soundstages feel like luxury hotels. The converted sugar plantation that served as Devil's Island prison camp stretched across humid coastline that hadn't seen this much activity since the actual French penal colony days. Temperature climbing toward 95 degrees by 10 a.m. Humidity that made breathing feel like drowning in slow motion. Production designer Anthony Masters had constructed an authentic replica of the infamous penal colony using original blueprints from French colonial archives. Stone walls that radiated heat like furnaces, iron bars that burned skin at midday, guard towers that offered no shade for the actors, who had to work beneath them for hours at a time. Everything designed to match historical accuracy while pushing human endurance to limits that insurance companies had initially refused to cover. The crew worked in 4-hour shifts to prevent heat exhaustion. Actors had medical personnel standing by during every outdoor scene. Cameras required constant cooling to prevent internal mechanisms from overheating. Even the film stock had to be stored in refrigerated containers to prevent degradation. This was filmmaking at the edge of what technology and human physiology could sustain. But director Franklin Schaffner insisted that authentic conditions were essential for authentic performances. No air conditioning between takes, no comfortable dressing rooms, no escape from the physical reality that the actual Papillon and his fellow prisoners had endured for years without relief. Steve McQueen, 43 years old, established superstar at the absolute peak of his box office power. Bullet, The Getaway, and now Papillon. $30 million in star power, walking around in a faded prison uniform that somehow looked more authentic than costumes that cost thousands. Henri Charrière, Papillon himself. The butterfly who refused to stay caged. Dustin Hoffman, 36 years old, method acting intensity wrapped in the same prison stripes but approaching the role from completely different philosophical territory. Fresh from the Graduate success, building toward the dramatic peaks that would define 70s cinema. Dega, the counterfeiter. Papillon's unlikely partner. Intellectual survival, meeting physical endurance in conditions that would break most men. Two different approaches to becoming someone else meeting under a Caribbean sun that made thinking difficult and pretending impossible. The morning had started with routine. 5 a.m. makeup call in humidity that made adhesive sweat off before cameras rolled. Costume fittings that had to account for weight loss both actors were experiencing from the physical demands of authentically portraying men slowly starving in tropical imprisonment. By 8 a.m., they were in position for the key partnership scene. Papillon and Dega establishing the relationship that would carry them through escape attempts, solitary confinement, and psychological torture that would test every assumption about human endurance. Director Franklin Schaffner had demanded absolute authenticity, real locations, practical effects, physical conditions that matched what the actual prisoners had experienced. No studio comfort. No air conditioning between takes. Heat, humidity, and the constant pressure of knowing that every scene had to work, because reshooting in these conditions was nearly impossible. Hoffman had been preparing for 6 months. Intensive research into the historical Louis Dega. Method acting techniques that involved actually losing weight. Studying French prison documents. Interviewing former inmates who'd survived similar conditions. Complete immersion designed to eliminate the distance between actor and character. McQueen had read the script, talked to Henri Charrière himself, and showed up ready to work. No extensive preparation, no method techniques, just professional confidence and natural instinct for understanding men who survived by adaptation rather than analysis. Dustin, let's run through the contraband exchange. Schaffner called from behind a camera that weighed more than most men could carry in this heat. Remember, these men are forming a partnership that will mean life or death for both of them. They moved into position. Hoffman immediately shifted into character mode. Posture changed. Breathing pattern altered. Voice dropped into the educated cadence he'd developed for Dega. Method transformation that was visible and deliberate. McQueen just stood there. Same posture. Same breathing. Same voice. But somehow he'd become Papillon without any visible preparation. Natural transformation that looked effortless, but carried complete authority. Action. The scene played perfectly. Two prisoners negotiating mutual protection in an environment where trust could mean survival or death. Hoffman's Dega was intellectually calculating. McQueen's Papillon was instinctively evaluating. Different approaches to the same desperate mathematics. Cut. Excellent work. Let's do it again from a different angle. Between takes, they stayed in the tropical heat that made most crew members seek shade. Hoffman continued his method preparation. Staying in character. Maintaining the psychological space he'd created for Dega. McQueen lit a cigarette and became completely himself again. Professional actor taking a smoke break in Jamaica. Dustin, you're working pretty hard over there, McQueen observed, watching Hoffman remain locked in character preparation. Character work requires constant maintenance, Hoffman replied without breaking out of Dega's voice patterns. The moment you disconnect, you lose authenticity. Or you could just be authentic to begin with. The comment landed like a challenge. Hoffman looked at McQueen directly for the first time that morning. What do you mean? I mean, maybe all that preparation is getting between you and the character instead of connecting you to him. Hoffman felt the philosophical ground shifting beneath him. 6 months of intensive method work being questioned by someone who appeared to achieve the same results through intuition. Steve, method acting is about finding truth through systematic exploration of character psychology and motivation. It's proven technique. For some people, maybe. But what if systematic exploration is actually systematic avoidance? Avoidance of what? Avoidance of just being the guy. Hoffman was quiet for a moment, processing the idea that his elaborate preparation might be creating distance rather than eliminating it. You think I'm overthinking the role? I think you're thinking about the role instead of just living it. They reset for the second take. Same scene. Same blocking. But Hoffman was now aware of his own process in ways that made the process feel awkward and artificial. Action! This time Hoffman struggled slightly. Consciousness of technique interfering with technique itself. The method preparation becoming a performance of method preparation instead of character immersion. McQueen remained effortlessly natural. No visible technique, but complete believability. Papillon existing in the moment without reference to preparation or process. Cut! Dustin, you seemed a little tense that time. Whatever you were doing in the first take, go back to that. But Hoffman couldn't go back to unconscious application of conscious technique. McQueen's observation had introduced self-awareness that made natural performance impossible. Steve, can I ask you something? Hoffman said as they prepared for take 3. Sure. When you approach a character like Papillon, what's your process? How do you prepare? McQueen smiled without condescension. I don't prepare to be Papillon. I just stop being Steve McQueen. That's not a technique, that's just stopping. Right. Just stopping. Stopping what? Stopping trying to become someone else. Just letting someone else exist through me. Hoffman struggled with the concept. His entire approach was based on active construction of character through research, analysis, and systematic psychological building. McQueen was describing passive allowance. Letting character happen instead of making it happen. That sounds like you're not doing any work. Maybe. Or maybe I'm doing different work. What kind of work? Getting out of my own way. The third take was a revelation. Hoffman tried to apply McQueen's non-technique. Instead of building Dega through method preparation, he just stopped building Steve McQueen. The result was immediate and authentic. Character emerging through subtraction rather than addition. Cut! Perfect! That's exactly what we needed. During the lunch break, they sat in the shade of a palm tree that provided blessed relief from Caribbean sun that could cause heat stroke in minutes. Steve, I've been studying acting for 15 years. Method technique, Stanislavski. Everything designed to create authentic character performance. And it works for you. It has worked, but what you showed me today, it's like you're accessing something I can't reach through all my preparation. McQueen finished his cigarette before responding. Dustin, you know what I think the difference is? What? I think you're trying to convince yourself you're Louis Dega, but I'm not trying to convince myself I'm Papillon. Then what are you doing? I'm just not trying to convince myself I'm Steve McQueen. The distinction was subtle but fundamental. Hoffman's method approach was additive, building character on top of self. McQueen's approach was subtractive, removing self to allow character space to exist. You make it sound like characters already exist somewhere, and we just have to find them. Maybe they do. Maybe Papillon exists in the same place Steve McQueen exists, and maybe the trick isn't learning to become Papillon. Maybe it's learning to stop being Steve McQueen long enough to let Papillon breathe. Hoffman considered the philosophical implications. His entire training was based on constructing performance through systematic technique, but McQueen was suggesting that the best performance came from systematic non-technique. Steve, doesn't that approach require some kind of natural talent that can't be taught? Maybe. Or maybe it just requires stopping trying to learn something you already know. I don't understand. McQueen stood up, adjusting his prison uniform in a way that somehow made it look more authentic than when costume designers had fitted it. Dustin, you know how to be a man who's scared, who's hungry, who's desperate to survive, who forms unlikely partnerships with people he normally wouldn't trust. Of course. Then you know how to be Louis Dega. All that method preparation is just teaching you things you already understand about being human under pressure. Hoffman realized that McQueen was describing character as extension of human experience, rather than construction of artificial personality. Not becoming someone else, but discovering which version of yourself would exist under different circumstances. So when you play Papillon, you're just being Steve McQueen in Papillon's situation? No. I'm being whoever I would be if I was brave enough, desperate enough, and committed enough to survive what Papillon survived. That's not the same person as Steve McQueen. Exactly, but it's not a different person either. It's just a version of the same person that most people never have to find. The afternoon session was different for both actors. Hoffman continued using method technique, but with different understanding. Instead of building character, he used preparation to eliminate the psychological barriers that prevented character from emerging naturally. McQueen continued his intuitive approach, but with increased respect for the systematic work that helped other actors reach similar destinations through different routes. Dustin, McQueen said as they wrapped for the day, your method work is impressive, really, but don't let the technique become more important than what the technique is trying to achieve. Which is truth, just truth. And you think I was missing truth through too much technique? I think you were working so hard to find truth that you were missing truth that was already there. Hoffman understood. The method was a tool for accessing authentic performance, but tools could become obstacles if they required more attention than the job they were designed to accomplish. Steve, can I ask you one more thing? Sure. When you said, the method is a mask, what did you mean? McQueen looked out at the Caribbean horizon, where the real Papillon had once stared toward freedom he might never reach. I meant that sometimes preparation can become performance itself, and when that happens, you're not playing the character, you're playing your preparation. And the alternative is? Just be the character. No mask, no performance, no preparation, just truth. Steve McQueen adjusted his jacket and told Dustin Hoffman, the method is a mask, just be the character. Subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy for stories they never told you.